I'm Guido Rebecchini, and I'm professor of Renaissance art here at the Courtauld, and welcome everybody. I'm very pleased to see such a good turnout, even again in this strange day. And it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce our distinguished speaker today in our series of the Renaissance seminar at the Courtauld. Muriel Barbier is the chief curator and director of heritage and collections at the Château de Fontainebleau. She is a graduate from the École du Louvre and the Institut National du Patrimoine, where she specialized in the history of architecture, furniture, and interior decoration of the modern era between the 15th and 18th century especially. Since graduating, she has worked at the section Histoire of the Louvre, the Histoire du Louvre, and as a curator at the Musée National de la Renaissance at Écouen and at the Mobilier National. Among her many publications, she has produced a marvelous series of interdisciplinary contributions, which are really impressive in their breadth and range. They include the catalogue of the textile collection at the National Museum at Écouen, a monograph on the Élysée Palace, the presidential palace, and she has edited several exhibition catalogues, including imperial silks for Versailles, one on the lost palaces of Napoleon, one on theater in the Renaissance, one on Louise de Savoie, the mother of the King Francis I, about whom we are going to hear something, I'm sure, today, and one about music in the Renaissance. So an incredible range of different disciplines that she has been able to master in her publications. Muriel is therefore as much as a scholar, as a curator and a museum manager, and her multiple skills and strengths have allowed her to oversee ambitious conservation projects, to curate research-based exhibitions and the museum itself, and to write important scholarly contributions while continuing to teach modules at the highly prestigious École du Louvre, our sister, rival, twin kind of French institution. In a word, essentially what I wanted to say is that she does what we aspire to do, to move across this highly exciting fields of research, management, curating, restore, conservation, which is what the Courtauld is now geared up to be doing and has done in the past so well. So, without further ado, I will now let the podium to Muriel, who will speak about Fontainebleau, the new Rome of Francis I. As a Roman, I'm very pleased. Dream of a king, reality of a curator. So, welcome.
Thank you very much, Guido, and good evening, everyone. I'm very honored to be here today, and I would like to thank Guido Rebecchini for this invitation to talk about Fontainebleau at the Courtauld Institute, indeed the sister of the École du Louvre, and it is very nice to think it as a brotherhood or sisterhood between our institutions. Guido gave me several indications on what to say, but if I had followed all the tracks he thought about, I would have needed 5 hours to talk. So I decided to focus on the project of Francis I for Fontainebleau and on the artist who created this amazing castle during the first half of the 16th century. Fontainebleau is not just one monarch's place. It belonged to all of them, a sort of family home for the kings of France, passed on from generation to generation from the Middle Ages to the 19th century. While the medieval origins of the castle are still visible in the former keep in Fontainebleau, it was Francis I, seduced by the site and the forest, who in 1528 commissioned a spectacular development. He had the medieval castle turned into a large Italianate palace, as a reflection of the power of a learned and art-loving king. To this day, the château retains significant vestiges of the decoration and ornamentation from the French Renaissance, the principles of which were imported by Italian artists invited to Fontainebleau by Francis I, such as Rosso Fiorentino or Francesco Primaticcio. Several interior decorations still remain, as the King's Gallery, the bedchamber of the Duchess of Étampes, the ballroom, and the Golden Gate. They attest of a new age in European art and can be reconsidered in the light of recent restorations and reinterpretations. Today, this heritage obliges us, and the teams of the Château de Fontainebleau work for its preservation, but also for its large diffusion to visitors that no longer necessarily have the keys to understand it. So, so this is Fontainebleau from the garden, and up here. I would like to go through this 1.5 hour with you on several points. First, a short presentation of Fontainebleau and as it is today. Then we will look at the building works in the Renaissance, and especially the building works made by Francis I. Then this new Rome imagined by Francis I in the interior decorations. I will also go through several recent interpretations of these decorations, and then say some word about our contemporary challenges in terms of conservation. So, where is Fontainebleau? For those who don't know the place, Fontainebleau is here, just in the south of Paris, as you see on the map of France here on the screen. It is north of the Loire Valley. You have the Loire Valley here. It's starting here, going to the ocean there, and Paris is here. The Alps and Italy, of course, this way. So it is also located in a forest area, so it's a more zoomed map you have here. You can see that all the green here all around is what is left from the forest of Fontainebleau. Here, this is the Seine with Melun on the north and Nemours in the south. I'm showing Nemours and Melun because there were also medieval castles here in these two small towns. So Fontainebleau is a small town in the middle of a forest. The castle is completely connected to the forest and has developed with it. The court life and the uses of stag hunt had a strong influence on the development of the castle, its garden, and on the forest as well. The forest is indeed the reason why the kings of France chose to build a castle here. We do not really know when the first medieval castle was settled, but the first mention noted in the archives is 1137. So we know that there was already a castle in the 12th century here in the middle of this forest of Fontainebleau. Before going deeper in detail, so this is, how we suppose the medieval castle looked like, so a very classical castle with a keep and walls around it. There was a large pod that still remains, and an abbey, the Trinity Abbey, and all around this large forest. So the 3D restitution you see here is not completely right because we're still working on it, but well, I wanted to show it to you to see how the castle gets larger and larger decades after decades. But before going deeper in details, let me give you some contemporary data. In numbers, Fontainebleau, this is 1,500 square meter on 11 levels, 1,536 rooms, 121 open to the public for different reasons, more than 40,000 works of art, 130 hectares of park and gardens, 2,600 meters of facades, and 2.5 hectares of roofs. I could go on and go on to say numbers about Fontainebleau because it's it's very big, as you know. But Fontainebleau is also a heritage monument and site protected by the French law, and it is a UNESCO site since 1981. It has become a museum since 1927. Before that, Fontainebleau was maintained as a residence for kings, emperors, and for French presidents of the Republic. So it's a quite recent museum compared to its long history. It has also a very important history in the 20th century that we don't have necessarily the place to talk about it to our visitors. So I'm just showing you a slide on, about it. You can see wounded soldiers from the First World War that were housed here in the Flower Gallery during the First World War. Here on the right, the schools of music and fine arts, the American schools of music and fine arts that settled in the Château de Fontainebleau in 1921 and that are still coming every July in Fontainebleau to teach students in music and in fine arts, and the NATO headquarters that were in the offices courtyard from 1949 to 1966, so after World War II. Though Fontainebleau is also reflecting a lot of French history, not only the royal time but also the more recent period. Today it is a property of the French state managed by the Ministry of Culture with missions of conservation and education. 152 persons are working on site, mostly civil servants. And they do their best to welcome our 560,000 visitors inside and 2.2 million visitors in the gardens. But enough with numbers now. You can see here an aerial view of Fontainebleau, and when visitors arrive, they first notice the what we call the Oval Courtyard, but which was called the White Horse Courtyard and the Office Courtyard, depending the time. And they arrive this gate and they saw this main facade, not noticing that there are several other courtyards behind it and several buildings. They don't immediately notice this large place they are entering in. How did this castle grew like this from the medieval keep to the tentacular building that we see today? The major date in the history of Fontainebleau is that of 1528, shortly after the return of Francis I from his captivity. And we are going to see what happened after this precise date. At that time, on the European political scene, as you know, sovereigns were still fighting for borders and territories. The first half of the century was marked by three great personalities that you can see on the screen, who shaped and shared the appearance of Europe at that time. So, Henry VIII, who you well know, Charles V, and of course Francis I with his portrait by Tiziano kept at the Louvre, the King of France from 1515 to 1547. It is necessary to remember this situation because all these kings, and especially Francis I, wanted to prove their power on this large field of Europe. Here you can see a map of Europe we are here at the beginning of in the middle of the 16th century. So France has this appearance. with Lorraine was still an independent duchy, and as well as Savoy here. So it was a shorter France than today, and of course Charles V's reign over this large Roman Empire and on Spain. It is necessary to remember that Francis I carried a legacy. Before him, his predecessors had an Italian dream. Through the connection of Valentine Visconti, Charles VIII and Louis XII were convinced that the Milanese belonged to them legitimately. Barely king, Francis I resumes the road to Milano and won the Battle of Marignan on the 13th of September 1515. So this was a big victory that started his personal reign. So you have here the map of France with here the territories that Francis I had after his victory in Marignan. So it enlarged France in this area, this eastern area. But the situation didn't last. I will not go through the Italian wars because it would take too much time, but it is significant to keep this political situation in mind. And especially that Francis I went on and on, and went on and on so much that he finally lost the battle. The Battle of Pavia, and after this defeat, Francis I was kept prisoner in Madrid. His mother, Louise of Savoy, we talked about it just a few minutes before, played a key role in his liberation. This is not a simple detail because Louise of Savoy played a key role also in the French politics when her son was in prison in Madrid, but also as the first counselor of the King of France. And she is quite everywhere in the decoration of the Château de Fontainebleau. At the beginning of his reign, Francis I lived mostly in the Loire Valley, so you can see here Orléans, but this is the only thing. Yes, so he had castles in this area like Chambord, Amboise, and Blois. But after he came back from Madrid, he finally decided to move his court to Ile-de-France and to settle in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, the Château de Madrid, which is not in Madrid, which was in the Bois de Boulogne in the west of Paris, Villers-Cotterêts in the north of Paris, and among them Fontainebleau. Francis I found a medieval castle that needed to be enlarged and adapted to the courtyard life. And in 1528, the king decided to demolish most of the old castle and to erect new buildings on the foundations of the Oval Courtyard. In less than 20 years, Francis I rebuilt and expanded the buildings, decorated the interiors, and arranged the gardens. So on this map, you can see all the destructions that occurred from the Renaissance to the 19th century. But I would like you to focus on the buildings marked in blue, and especially the one in the southeast corner of the Oval Courtyard. So to help you, so you have here this Oval Courtyard, the actual entrance of our visitors today, the main facade, and you have here in blue what was the Trinity Convent, Trinity Abbey, with the church and the abbey itself here. So this existed in the Middle Ages, and you have here the former keep in blue. So this plan is showing the result of research conducted by the chief architect of historical monuments working with us in Fontainebleau and of academics. This is the most convincing location of the Trinity Chapel. Today, the Trinity Chapel is located here, but it has been reconstructed under the reign of Francis I, but finally finished under the reign of Louis XIII. It lasted quite a long time. But when Francis I arrived in 1528, the chapel was here. This Trinity Chapel was founded by Saint Louis in 1259, and it was a very meaningful place for the kings of France during the whole medieval time. The abbey itself was also founded by Saint Louis, but restored and modified between 1528 to 1538 to house the sovereign during the reconstruction works of the castle. And it was apparently preserved to the reign of Henry II before being totally destroyed. So we are going to talk about this gallery that is called today Francis I Gallery, with here the terrace and the kitchens. Here another wing that housed the king's, the mother queen's apartment, but after the death of Louise of Savoy. Here is the Oval Courtyard, which has foundations from the Middle Ages, with this part also rebuilt during the reign of Francis I, and here you have the Golden Gate. So Francis I took back to the religious Trinitarians a certain number of lands which he needed to enlarge the estate, and integrated the abbey into the royal castle by connecting it with a gallery, so the famous Francis I Gallery. So I show you again a 3D restitution, which is not completely right. We still have to work on it because the chapel is not in the right direction. It's in the direction of the actual chapel, but it was in the 16th century. It was oriented west, of course. And you have here the keep, the courtyard that has been reconstructed by Francis I, and the gallery, with the bath apartment, the kitchen, and the famous gallery on the first floor, and the library on the second floor, with the beginning of gardens around the castle. So the step by step, the castle gets bigger and bigger. Here in red, you can see the building works of Francis I, postponed on the plan of du Cerceau. It's also a map drawn by the chief architect for historical monuments. So you recognize the place. So this today honored courtyard, which was the offices courtyard, services courtyard, and the gallery. So the Trinity Chapel and the Abbey no longer exists. The former keep is there with the king's apartments, and here the ballroom, which was a loggia at the time of Francis I, and the Golden Gate that opened the castle in the direction of the forest and in the direction of the Loire Valley. So maybe another. Sorry, there's many plans, but it's important to understand what we are going to talk about after. On this map, you can see in yellow the castle of the years of 1540s, and in green the extensions made between 1541 and 1543. So mainly this service courtyard that has been enlarged, and this building, but I won't talk about it, it's a private mansion. And here in yellow you recognize the Oval Courtyard, the keep, the gallery, the Trinity Chapel with the Abbey that will be destroyed, the Ulysses Gallery, which was called the Great Gallery during the Renaissance. It was also called the Ulysses Gallery because the decoration was about, the iconography was about Ulysses, as you can imagine, but it wasn't finished when Francis I died. It was completely finished under the reign of Charles IX. And this Ulysses Gallery has been destroyed in 1739. So you also have this long corridor going east, which no longer completely exists, but which was a pleasant place to admire the gardens, and of course places for the guards here to control the entrance of the park, and leading to the Golden Gate here. And these are also services area like stables or places for dogs. So we just saw here the service courtyard, and there is only one wing left of the 16th century from this service courtyard that was built between 1541 to 1543. The windows and the doors have been a little bit changed in the 18th and 19th century. You have to imagine that the west and the south wings of the courtyard looked exactly the same, with bricks and sandstones and these very blue roofs that are typical from the architecture of the French Renaissance in the 40s. One of the main buildings of that time is this Golden Gate that was the main entrance at the Renaissance, and that was maintained at the main entrance till the reign of Louis XIII. So it's a very high building that was supposed to be a sort of Italian loggia. The window you have here didn't exist at the time of Francis I, and the wooden gate didn't exist either. It was totally free, because the guards were far before at the entrance, as I show you on the plan. This gate, the building of this gate started in 1528, so exactly the year when Francis I arrived in Fontainebleau, and it has the inspiration is taken in several buildings. As you can notice here on the left of the screen, the monumentalized access to the castle of the archbishops of Rouen was in reality a sufficiently new solution in France at the beginning of the 16th century, that one could detect the influence of two Italian buildings. First, the triumphal gate of the Castel Nuovo in Napoli, and second, the Torricini facade in Urbino. So you have the two examples here on the screen. Of course, it's not exactly the same, but it is the idea that Francis I wanted to have to enlarge the royal appearance of the entrance of the castle. And this is one of the memory he had from Italy, and that his predecessors Charles VIII and Louis XII also had in mind. So these famous examples were really well known by the King of France, and his master mason was asked to do something that could look like this example of Urbino and Napoli. Okay, and here you have a detail of this Golden Gate that you can see in the Francis I gallery. It's a detail of the northern bay of the gallery, painted by Rosso Fiorentino between 1533 and 1539. This detail is probably painted at the end of the building site in around 1539. So you recognize the Golden Gate without the wing that was built here some years after, and with this small building here in which there was a staircase, the staircase that led to the king's apartment. And here you have the pod in which the Trinitarians monk had their fishes, that was kept by the kings as a decoration pod in the garden. The great staircase of the Oval Courtyard planned in 1531 was modified in 1541, plus a colonnade was added to surround the same courtyard. So I'm showing you what we all today call the Serio Portico, but which no longer really looked like the building attributed to Serio, because it has been moved during the reign of Henry IV when they enlarged the courtyard, and it was it was heavily transformed in the 18th and 19th century. But it's to give you an idea of this portico that was the entrance of the Queen apartment. But this colonnade here was added in the courtyard in the same period. As you can see here another part of this colonnade. The keep that was also transformed in the same time, and detail of what is left of the capitals of these columns. Next to, so inside this garden courtyard, next to the garden gate, you can find a door that leads to the staircase of the ballroom, door that was constructed in 1545 and decorated with the sculptures of Minerva and Juno. The bust of the king was here, but it was changed in the 19th century. And this door was just on the, when you enter the courtyard, just on the right of the Golden Gate, and was the way to enter this new loggia that afterward became the ballroom. And well, the ballroom is located here. So the door I just show you is behind this wall. The courtyard is just the Oval Courtyard is just behind this large wall, and the windows were added later, and the ballroom, the decoration of the ballroom was completely achieved under the reign of Henry II. And this is how it looks today, with a chandelier added in the reign of Louis Philippe. Fontainebleau is like several layers of history. It's not always easy to distinguish what was made and when it was made. You also find at the end of the ballroom another chapel, which is called the Palace Chapel itself, and this chapel Saint-Saturnin is on two levels. It's really typical of what was done in king's palaces, with a lower chapel and an upper chapel. It was also reconstructed in 1541, but the decoration of that time is no longer the one you can see today. So here you probably perfectly know this British Museum drawing by Jacques-André du Cerceau, drawn around 1570, where you can see all these tentacular buildings made around at the time of Francis I. So now you can recognize the Golden Gate here, so the main entrance of the castle, the Oval Courtyard with the ballrooms of former loggia and the Chapel Saint-Saturnin, the king's apartments that were on the north part of the Oval Courtyard with the former keep, the gallery here with these terrace where the kitchen, but the drawing is from 1570, so the kitchen are no longer there at that time, and above the gallery, the library. And here the stove pavilion, where under the reign of Henry II and Henry III, the king's apartment was moved. Here the Ulysse Gallery and the services courtyard that was built under the reign of Francis I. What you see here was digged during the religious war, so just at the beginning of the religious war, so it didn't exist at the time of Francis I. And you still have here the pod and the gardens. At the end of the Ulysses Gallery, you could find a pavilion, the Pomona Pavilion, and underneath a grotto, the Pine Grotto, because in the garden just next to the grotto where pines were planted, but I will talk to you about this later. So at this point, I wanted to show you how big Fontainebleau had become thanks to the buildings of Francis I. He connected to the gardens. I wanted to show you two particular constructions. So one is also the grotto I just told you about, and second, a small door, not so small, a door that is in the King's Gardens, the garden that is on the north, which we call today the Diana Garden. And in this Diana Garden, this King's Gardens, you can find the Egyptian door. This Egyptian door was built after 1541. It leads to the King's Garden and from the King's Garden, to the weapons pavilions. It was called like this because in this pavilion the weapons were kept. And it has been a lot discussed by academics, but I think that the hypothesis of Vincent Droguet and Sabine Fromel is mostly convincing. They think that it could have been made by Sebastiano Serlio shortly after his arrival in Fontainebleau. And indeed, Sebastiano Serlio arrived in Fontainebleau in 1541. There were other proposals to an attribution that are less convincing because the building itself didn't exist when let's say like this, the proposition of Vincent Droguet and Sabine Fromel are mostly convincing, and the inspiration of this door could be the telamon of the Villa Adriana in the Vatican collections today, so another Italian influence. But it also could come from a fountain created in Fontainebleau by Rosso Fiorentino and representing an Egyptian character made in 1535 by Rosso Fiorentino. That's why some scholars attribute this door also to Rosso Fiorentino. The grotto, the Pine Grotto, that is next to the Pine Garden, which is today called the English Garden in Fontainebleau because it has been transformed during the reign of Napoleon I into an English garden. It's in the most western garden. Since 1535, it was decided to plant vines, willows and pines in this part of the garden, and so this is why the garden was called Pine Garden. And the king seems to be particularly interested in this garden and embellished it with two factories, so the Pomona Pavilion, and decorated in the 1530s by Rosso Fiorentino and Primaticcio, showing the story of Vertum and Pomona. And in 1543, on the ground floor of this pavilion, Primaticcio imagined a grotto, then called the Pine Grotto. You can see the facade of the Pine Grotto as it looked today. The Atlantean, with their strong muscles and their poses, are definitely inspired by sculptures by Michelangelo, and indeed the art of Michelangelo is very present in Fontainebleau. The artist, the Primaticcio, definitely knew the work of Michelangelo, was strongly influenced by him, but the sculptures are not in Carrara marble but in sandstone, the main stone used in Fontainebleau. As you can see, these big giants here that have a pose that looks like the poses of the posture of the slaves of Michelangelo. In the last reign, or in the last years of the reign, the wing in Loggia, located between the Golden Gate and the Royal Chapel, were started, but they were unfinished at the death of the king. So most of the building works that were started at the time of Francis I went on after his death, especially during the reign of Henry II and Charles IX, and Fontainebleau continued to grow and grow like an octopus with tentaculars. So what's going on inside now? Though we were talking about the dream of a new Rome, and already outside we can see all the influences of Italy, Rome, and other places like Napoli or Urbino, and inside you will see that there are also many Italian inspirations, but not especially only Rome, but also Mantua, Genoa, and we're going to look at this further now. The construction site of Fontainebleau under Francis I is considered one of the major artistic centers of the 16th century in Europe. The meeting in this place of Italian artists called by the king to decorate the interiors of the royal residence allowed the development of a decorative style combining fresco painting and stucco sculpture. So you can see here how the King's Gallery, so the Gallery François I, look today, with many transformations that occurred at the end of the 18th century, in the 19th century, and even in the 60s, in the 1960s. But let's focus on what happened in the 16th century. Rosso Fiorentino arrived in France in 1530. He was recommended by Pietro Arentino. He was the pupil of Andrea del Sarto and a big admirer of Michelangelo. He was then mostly a painter for religious subjects, and then started a more civil decoration for the King of France. Francesco Primaticcio from Bologna, 10 years younger as Rosso Fiorentino, was recommended by his master Giulio Romano after he took part of the decoration of the Palazzo Te in Mantua, working on stucco. And you will see that the parallels between Mantua and Fontainebleau is really obvious. In 1533, the painters Francesco di Pellegrino and Jean-Antoine made a contract for stucco works to be done in the gallery. The accounts revealed the arrival of other artists and craftsmen, including many Italians from Rome, Florence, Firenze, Genoa, and Mantua. The new Rome of Francis I was gradually born. For the decoration of the gallery came also sculptors like Bartolomeo da Mignato, André Selon, Simon Leroy, Léon Bauchet, Claude Duval, who began to constitute this Franco-Italian team. In 1535-36, the numbers were further increased with Claude Baudouin, Henri Balor, Jos Fouque, who were more coming from northern France and even Low Countries, who helped to prepare the stucco, to apply it in successive layers, and have it modeled by Antoine Escuyer, Richard Poulon, Filippo de Sceaux, Jacques Vallet, and Jean Héron, so mostly French names. In 1536, the decoration was almost complete, as attested by the arrival of the gilder Simon Daucher and of Guillaume Carnel, Pierre Godard, Juste de Juste, Charles Dorigny, Jacques Leroy. I won't tell all the names, but we have the chance to have several accounts that list the name of the worker of the building works. To this list came the Bolognesi, Francesco Caccianemici and Giovanni Battista Bagnacavallo, the Florentines Luca Penni and Domenico del Barbiere, and the latter are mentioned without it being possible to know precisely in which part of the castle they worked, but one can easily imagine that they also intervened in the gallery. So this new room was rather a Spanish inn than a real Italian, 100% Italian team. The first room in which this team worked was the King Chamber. It was painted and sculpted from 1533 to 1535. The structures of the King's Chamber still exist, but the decoration is lost due to successive transformations. It was located on the first floor of the Oval Courtyard and next to the gallery. Between 1528 and 1531, this room was given by Francis I to his mother, Louise de Savoie, and this is after her death in 1531 that the king decided to settle in this chamber. This is when the new decoration was imagined. Stucco and fresco works started in 1533 and seemed to be finished in 1535. The accounts give also several names as Bartolomeo da Mignato and Lorenzo Naldini for the stuccos. And here you can see a drawing that is kept in the Louvre showing scenes from the story of Proserpina and terms here of Priap, Ceres, Cybele, and Bacchus. It's as this decoration has completely vanished, this drawing is the only testimony of the king's apartment in the former keep that we have left. It in several publications you can see it as considered as an original by Giulio Romano made for the Palazzote, but for many years now it has been given to Francesco Primaticcio, and it can be seen as the work of an artist still influenced by his master, and this is in this kind of drawing that you can see the link between the Palazzote and Fontainebleau with these terms that were probably the stuccos, and here these scenes of the story of Proserpina that were probably painted in stucco. At that time it was very original to create stucco in high relief in the decoration. In fact, it was quite new, and the chamber of the king was the first place where it was done in Fontainebleau. So located on the first floor of the north wing of the Oval Courtyard, the chamber of the Queen was transformed in 1533-1537, and it was the chamber of Elizabeth of Austria, the second wife of Francis I. The accounts reflect works of stucco and fresco in the same. It was quite in the same time than the works in the chamber of the king, so it is also difficult to know who was really working in which place, but the artists probably worked in the same time in different rooms, so especially the king chamber, the queen chamber, and the Golden Gate. Unfortunately, the Queen Chamber has not been described in the 16th century and has been deeply reorganized in the 17th and in the 19th century. So the only element left from the decoration of Primaticcio is the hood of the fireplace that you can see on the screen, with a fresco in an oval cartouche in a round cartouche by Primaticcio showing Venus and Adonis. And the figures all around with this kind of angels and chimeras are borrowed from a rectangular stucco on the vault of the Camera dei Stucchi at the Palazzote in Mantua, invented by Giulio Romano. So here again we can see the influence of Giulio Romano on Primaticcio. So it is unfortunate that nothing else is left because from this room, because Giovanni Battista da Gambara, the ambassador of the Duke of Mantua in France, had just a mention of this room, telling that it was one of the most beautiful thing to be seen in Fontainebleau. It was in December 1539. So, back to the gallery. Initially, the gallery built by Gilles Le Breton, who was the master mason working for Francis I. So the gallery built by Gilles Le Breton in 1528 was thought to be a corridor linking the sovereign's apartment to the Trinity Chapel. After the death of Francis I, after the death of Louis de Savoie, Francis I decided to include the gallery into his own apartment. It is said that he had the key of the gallery around his neck and that he perfectly knew the themes represented on frescoes. The building works was at its peak in 1535-1536. Most of the stuccos were created at this time. The first payments for painters were indistinctly mixed with those relating to the decorations of the King's Chamber and of the Queen's Chamber, and also of the room above the vestibule of the Golden Gate and the cabinet of the Pommern Pavilion. In addition, some artists not mentioned in the accounts have obviously worked in the gallery, such as the Emilian Niccolo Bellino da Modena, known as Nicolas Bellin in French, and also Francesco Primaticcio had his part in the gallery. The gallery is divided into 12 compartments, distributed 6 by 6 among two cabinets that no longer exist, but which were located on the north and on the south of the gallery. Each compartment is organized the same way. Paneling here in the lower part due to Francesco Siebeck de Carpi, another Italian coming from Carpi in the area of Modena. Then a large fresco above this paneling and two lateral scenes that are sometimes painted in frescoes, sometimes in stuccos. And above it, the salamander that is different above each fresco. I have it detail of the salamander, which is very important to understand the meaning of the gallery. And it is necessary at this point to say a word about the salamander. When Francis of Angoulême was barely 10 years old, he adopted the salamander as his emblem. The association of the future king with this fantastic animal appeared for the first time in 1504, and it appeared on a medal, of which several copies are known. On the one side, he had the salamander in flames, accompanied by the legend Notrisco al buono stingo el reo, I feed on the good fire and I extinguished the bad. If this motto appeared only with Francis, the salamander was already the emblematic image of his father, Charles of Angoulême. The adoption of this motto as a salamander, probably attributable to Francis' mother, Louise of Savoie, certainly referred to the great man of the family, Jean of Angoulême, Francis's grandfather. So this is a family history. And it was a way to remember the fame, the wisdom and the kindness of Jean of Angoulême, who was really known for these two parts of his temper. So the choice of the salamander from Charles of Angoulême, then by his son, recalled his memory and indicated to the young prince the model to follow. The meaning and the symbolism of this motto can also be clarified by the reading of the Hypnerotromachia by Polyphily by Francesco Colonna, published in Venice in 1499. This book was well known by the Franciscan monk François Desmoulins de Rochefort, a man of great culture, confidant of Louise de Savoie. and he was also the teacher of François d'Angoulême. He had established a first French translation of Colonna's hieroglyphics, and he found this symbolic of the salamander in the text of Francesco Colonna. So please keep this in mind because it has a meaning for the interpretation of the decoration we are going to talk about later. So, underneath the gallery, so you could find the bath apartment. So the gallery is on the first floor. You have here the plan of the first floor with the gallery and the two cabinets, cabinet north, cabinet south, and the staircase that was added later. The king's apartment was here on the east side, and the entrance of the gallery in the 16th century was there. Underneath the gallery, you could find a certain number of rooms that were a bath apartment, and there the kitchens that were under a terrace that was here. So the first one to mention the bath apartment was in 1586, Van Buchel, who talked about a pool with cold water and one with hot white water divided, and an apartment divided into several rooms. So the one of the pool was probably here. How Françoise Boudon, Jean Blécon, and Catherine Grodecki modelized the bath apartment. We also know that the apartment and the bath were adorned with painting from the royal collection, like the Mona Lisa, as you may know. So we will not have the time to go further in the decoration of these rooms, but they were covered with frescoes and stuccos following the same system than in the gallery. So all these decorations have disappeared today due to many transformations for the different kings of France and for the emperors, but the many drawings are kept in several public collections, like in the Musée du Louvre. Here you can see Diana's bath with her nymph. It's probably a drawing made for the fifth room of the bath. With this thematic, Primaticcio restored the antiquity the same way than Francis I by creating a sort of bath resort underneath his gallery. Here another drawing by Primaticcio also at the Musée du Louvre, showing Diana among her nymphs turning Acteo into a deer. And because of his subject, this drawing has been connected to the decor of the apartment of the bath of the castle of Fontainebleau. It shows also the virtuosity of Primaticcio in the drawing of nudes in particular. And the drawing of Primaticcio's are also well preserved for another place of the castle that was painted at that time. It is the Golden Gate. So as I told you, the Golden Gate was the main entrance of the castle. It is divided into two parts, the portico and the vestibule. This gate was the connection to the forest. The court left the castle for hunting from this gate and came back through it. It was oriented south, so it was also called Golden Gate because facing the sun. So here this drawing is showing Hercules dressed as a woman by Omphale. The iconography was taken in the second book of the Fasti by Ovid, and it was a preparatory drawing for one of the fresco of the portico. There were two frescoes. The one on the thematic of Hercules dressed as a woman by Omphale, and then Hercules surprising Faunus, who took him for Omphale. As Hercules was dressed as a woman. The Faunus, you can see here on the ground, thought he was Omphale when he trying to go into the bed of Oval at night, and then creating a surprising scene with the lights taken by the servants. And the light was painted in a very interesting and subtle way in this painting that was restored by Pico in 1835. And we talk about the restoration of the fresco, the conservation of the Golden Gate later, but the painting of Pico were not de-restored because the layer of Renaissance painting underneath was too thin to be reconstructed. In the vestibule, the iconography is related to the Iliad by Homer. It shows episodes of the Trojan War between the Greeks and the Trojan. So we also have several preparatory drawing by Francesco Primaticcio. The one you can see here on the left of the slide is kept at the Gallery degli Uffizi in Firenze. And here on the right you can see what is left from the fresco by Francesco Primaticcio after conservation work that were finished just last year. So in this part, in the Golden Gates vestibule, the thematic was completely different compared to the portico, where you had an episode of the Hercules history. Here we are in a completely different story with Homer and his Iliad, but you have to remember that the end of the apartments of the Château de Fontainebleau is finishing with the Ulysses gallery. So you have the Iliad at the entrance and the Odyssey at the end. This scene shows the goddess Hera coming to the kingdom of Hypnos to ask him if he could put Zeus to sleep, while the Trojans she supports can regain control in the battle. The thematic of sleep and dreams are recurrent in Homer's narrative, and we find it also very often in Fontainebleau's decoration. Here, there's another part of the fresco, so in an octagon showing Hera here in her chariot, and here you have Zeus asleep here in the clouds with Hypnos and his large wings, with this very interesting da sotto in su way to show this sky event. Here, of course, the situation changed as very often in Homer's narrative. Zeus finally wake up and he's in rage, and this scene is showing Zeus' rage against Hera. She is punished by being suspended in the air. You can see here a small character from the feet. You can see the sole of her feet here. So this is her punishment. She is suspended in the air, and here you can see Zeus throwing on earth Hephaestus, the favorite son of Hera, all around in the clouds. Other gods that are very frightened by the reaction of Zeus and that do not make a move. Also a very interesting way to depict the scene and to create this da sotto in su effect and all this perspective, the architectural perspective all around. This is all trompe-l'œil. This is not a real architecture that you have here. Here you can see most of the vestibule of the Golden Gate. So this wall didn't exist at the time of Francis I. It was added in the 17th century. And of course here you have a painting, an addition of the 19th century. It was painted in 1835 by Pico with the coat of arms of the King Louis Philippe. But this was so the effect. You can see here the punishment of Hera and Hephaestus thrown on the earth. So there was another project for this Golden Gate. And several projects, in fact, existed for the tympanum of the Golden Gate. First, Francis I wanted Benvenuto Cellini to create a relief in bronze that is now kept in the Musée du Louvre. It did not fit in the tympanum, it was too big. So, well, you probably know that Cellini had many difficulties with Francis I and with the Duchess of Étampes. So it was, even if it created a wonderful psalter that is now at the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. And then it has been imagined to have a terracotta decoration by Della Robbia, which finally was not started. And in the end, this is Francesco Primaticcio designs stucco high relief showing figures of fame on each side of a tondo. So the figure of fames are here. The tondo had the salamander inside. The salamander that you can see here was changed in the 19th century. And so from the entrance, the visitor could see the salamander, and on each side of this salamander, the two figures of fame. The subject of Cellini, so this nymph of Cellini, could be the matter of a whole lecture, because it embodied also what is Fontainebleau in the imagination of the 16th century, but of today also, because Fontainebleau was born from the forest, but it was also born from a small fountain that was found by a dog hunting, a dog that was hunting with the kings in nearby the future castle. So this character of the nymph is also very, very present quite everywhere in Fontainebleau decoration. But well, finally, this wonderful bronze by Cellini never took its place in Fontainebleau. Few years after the Golden Gate, the chamber of the Duchess of Étampes, who was Francis I's favorite, was painted and decorated with stuccos. You can see what is now the Duchess of Étampes chamber. It is a staircase. It was transformed into a staircase in 1749 because the king's staircase was too small and not royal enough for Louis XV. So they decided to, Angela Gabriel decided to transform the bottom of the room into a staircase. But they kept, fortunately, the frescoes and the stuccos, and this place was painted also by Francesco Primaticcio, showing different episodes of the history of Alexander, and especially stories with his mistress. So there is of course a connection between the favorite of the king and the mistress of Alexander the Great. So with the same principle of large frescoes and really high relief stuccos with nudes, females' bodies, and especially which are reflecting this nymph I was talking about a few minutes before. Here you can see a detail showing Thalestris climbing into Alexander's bed, and you can notice these large, very high female figures. Their heads were changed in the 19th century, so they are not really Manierist head, but the bodies still are the canon of a Manierist body. And here another detail with Alexander taming Bucephalus, the horse, with these very rich stuccos that are mixed with many Italian influences, with artists coming from a different region of Italy. So in the context of today's talk, it is not possible for me to go into detail about all parts of Fontainebleau decoration, but I would like now to share with you recent interpretation of the Francis I gallery. So here again, the plan of the apartment. So remember, a bath apartment on the ground floor, the gallery, which was a diplomatic place, because Francis I opened the door of the gallery to ambassadors, to Charles V, who visited him in 1539, to other clergymen or councillors. Well, it was not the chance to anyone to enter this gallery. So a diplomatic place mostly that was symbolizing the king himself. And on the second floor you had the library of the king. Erudition is indeed everywhere in the gallery. Its decoration is inspired by ancient texts, manuscripts from the library of Francis I, archaeological remains, and works of art. The iconographic program and the progress of the painted cycle were inextricably linked to two oil paintings on canvas by Rosso Fiorentino, which were not initially intended for the gallery, but which found a place there on its small side. You had one here and one here. So to the east, you could find this painting, which size has been transformed. It was an oval painting transformed into a rectangular one. It's a painting that is kept now at the National Museum of History and Art in Luxembourg. And on the western part, you could find a painting that looked like this one. This one on the screen is a copy by Jacob de Backer that is at the National Museum of Renaissance, le Musée National de la Renaissance in Écouen. These two works depicted the polarities of love according to Neoplatonic principles. As Carlo Falciani understood, the Francis I gallery obeyed the prevailing philosophical logic appreciated by the king and disseminated by humanists in his entourage. To understand this, it is important to remember the humanistic universe in which Francis I was educated and continued to evolve throughout his life. On the short east side, above the door of the king's chamber, Bacchus, Cupid, and Venus alluded to physical love. Toward the west, Venus and Cupid embodied the form of high and celestial love on which the salamander fed. Remember, I feed on the good fire. These two oval canvases depicted the polarities of love according to Neoplatonic principles embodied by the salamander. And the 12 other scenes painted in fresco on the long walls, alternating with the window, six to the east and 6 to the west, symbolize the effects of these two different forms of love. The vanished simile was one of the keys to interpreting this cycle. In the northern cabinet that I show you on the plan, there was a painting by Francesco Primaticcio that we only know through the print by Léon Davant that you can see here on the screen. This painting is showing Semele abandoned to her sensual and unbridled love for Jupiter. She was consumed at the sight of Jupiter's thunderbolt. He carried their son Bacchus in his thigh. And the Bacchus, who in turn inflamed the sense with wine. So we find Bacchus again, evoked by his parents, indeed, in this fresco. In the other cabinet, the south one, you had the Jupiter and Danae, also painted by Francesco Primaticcio. So, in the middle of the gallery, there was a bust of Francis, of the king, turning his back on the scene of Semele and looking toward Danae, impregnated by the shower of God. According to Piero Valeriano, Danae symbolized the beauty of the soul. Valeriano also interpreted the impregnating rain as a symbol of the abundance and the heavenly goods that only God can distribute through his love. The discourse, inspired by the Neoplatonic reflection on love by Guillaume Budet, in vogue since Marcilius Ficino and Pico della Mandorla, offers a spiritual progression from profane love to celestial love. And Guillaume Budet was the librarian of the library of Francis I. He was appointed to this job in 1528, also the same date. And we, as Carlo Falciani, we now think that Guillaume Budet had a strong role in creating this iconographic decoration in the gallery. It is also, we also can find this interpretation of the elevation of the soul in De l'Institution du Prince, which was a book written by Guillaume Budet to help the young Francis I to become good king, and in which profane love is expressed in the three as something to let down, to go to a higher love. So this profane love is expressed in the three eastern bays and in the erotic Bacchus, Venus, and Cupid, which we agree with Carlo Falciani to place in the eastern and near the king's bedchamber. So here is the first fresco you see when you enter the gallery from the king's chamber. The similarity of the naked woman here, bathing in a knee-deep pool, with the similarity with the Vatican's Venus of Cnidus has certainly contributed to its identification with Venus. However, this scene should be seen as Pallas's bath, since the weapons the Cupids carry are precisely the shield with the Gorgon, the head of Medusa, the spear, and the goddess crescent helmet. You can see here the Cupids carrying the weapons all around there. The scene depicts the moment when the bathing goddess blinds the young Tiresias, who is here, the young child with this green-blue scarf around him. So Tiresias, having seen her naked against his will, is punished by a harsh and unjust law. Tiresias is depicted here with while his mother, the nymph Chariclo, who is the second woman here dressed in the fresco, with clasped hand, begs the goddess to restore his sight, because Pallas has taken the sight from Tiresias. Pallas refused, but agreed to lighten Tiresias' sentence by allowing him to understand the language of bird, while granting him for a longer life than ordinary mortals and the power to keep his gifts in the underworld. In the lower right corner, in the foreground here, a Cupid hides his eyes in his elbow and points a finger to a book. So thus signifying the future of Tiresias, the seer of Thebes. This version of the myth of Tiresias is given by Perecide and is found in the library of the Greek mythographer Apollodorus. Note that in the Meno, Plato made Tiresias an extra-lucid model who, in the underworld, retains his lucidity by divine favor in a world where all is only shadow. To the right, the scene is flanked by a large stucco female nude facing the king's apartment, and to the left, a large male nude inviting one to explore the gallery. Above them stand young men, here and here, reminiscent of Michelangelo's Ignudi in the Sistine Chapel in their form, and always the salamander. So the entrance of the gallery thus marks the opening of the speech, which illustrates Budet's thinking. A king without letters is like Pallas without weapons. He is helpless and loses all foresight. Facing with Pallas blinding Tiresias, the episode is identified as the battles of the Lapids, the Centaurs and the Lapids. The scene is taken from Homer's Odyssey or Ovid Metamorphosis, on the day of the wedding of Piritoris and Hippodamia, the centaurs, due to excess of wine and lust, attacked the Lapith, who ultimately emerged victorious from the battle. So the scenes played on the redundancy with the two small battle reliefs in the previous fresco. Here you have two battle reliefs, and here you have this big battle of the centaur and the Lapith. And it's showing also half human and half animals being driven by their impulses and unable to control them. Next fresco, the education of Achilles, probably taken from Statius Achilleid, when Achilles, before leaving the court of Lycomed, recounts his education with Chiron and insists on a particular perilous swimming exercise. And the moment here is when you also have half a human and half an animal. According to Dora and Erwin Panofsky, the education of Achilles by the centaur Chiron would be an unequivocal allusion to the education of Francis I, or the education of the Dauphin Francis, the son of Francis I. However, according to Piero Valeriano, the centaur Chiron is a creature endowed with human intellect but also with bestial appetites. Furthermore, in one of Andrea Alciati's emblems, Chiron becomes the image of the prince's advisor, he who shows himself human in public when, under the facade of a just war, of equity, or of the public good, secretly devours the wealth of people, appears from behind more inhuman than wild beasts. So, reading Alciati's words, it therefore seems difficult to see in this fresco an edifying reference to the education of the Dauphin. The story of Achilles and Chiron could be a warning against the bestial appetites of courtiers or of those to whom the education of princes was often entrusted. On both sides, the two frescoes on both sides of this fresco, two smaller frescoes shows giants and are identified by William McAllister Johnson as allegories of indisciplines on the left and of acceptance of constraints on the right, indicating that lack of education leads to slavery. Here another fresco that shows the role that could have had Guillaume Budet in the creation of the gallery. This is a story showing mankind losing eternal youth. This story is coming from a source of that is the Teriaka of Nicander of Colophon, and the choice is rather obscure. It's a very ancient text linked to its choice is linked to its recent discovery and especially to the acquisition of its manuscript by Francis I for his library in Fontainebleau. The fable tells that men had received perpetual youth from Jupiter, but lazy, they had it carried by a donkey. When the donkey wanted to drink, a snake living in the river only granted it in exchange for youth. Since then, snakes have shed their skins every year while men are aging. So you can see in the background a group of men and women receiving youth from Mercurius coming from the sky and is carrying youth given by Jupiter. Here a couple with a child unable to carry youth embodied by this woman. Here the donkey carrying youth and this snake of the fable that looks like, well, we don't know, a bird or an eagle and a snake. And on the right, finally, the humans aging because they left the donkey drink the water and the snake take youth. The fable of Nicander of Colophon reminds us that youth is fleeting and temporary, but also, in light of Achilles' education, that even he could not escape death. Next fresco is very violent. It is the revenge of Nauplius and the death of Ajax the Little. This history is developed in Homer's Odysseus against Homer, but we can also find it in the Fabulae by Hyginus and in the picture gallery by Philostratus. The intrepid warrior and king of the Locrian, Ajax led his fleet to Troy. On his return from Trojan War, suffering the wrath of the gods whose temples the Greek had pillaged, and because Ajax had wrecked Cassandra in the temple of Athena, Greek's fleet was shipwrecked near Cape Capharia. Struck by Athena, Ajax's dead body was thrown into the rock. This is what you see on the left. Nauplius, who wanted revenge on his compatriots, including Odysseus, who had his son Palamedes killed, had lit a lighthouse on the reefs on which most of the ships were wrecked. So you have the lighthouse here. And in the foreground, Nauplius and his followers killed the survivors trying to reach the shore. So according to Hyginus, this episode symbolized the baseness of those who give into the desire of revenge. The stucco frame is composed of numerous small low reliefs, here, and on the top, and 2 empty niches, here, which are very originals. In the lower part, in this cartouche, the fresco depicts Neptune and Amymon, Nauplius' parents, and the fresco itself is very dark with faces of the characters that express rage, and it's typical from Rosso Fiorentino painting. This is one of the fresco in which you recognize the most the style of Rosso Fiorentino in the gallery. So among the six Western rectangular frescoes, on the other part, some events depict Francis I at the heart of edifying myth, to emphasize that he himself, like the salamander, had chosen to feed on the good fire and conquer the sinful fire. So on this side of the gallery, an ideal portrait of the sovereign's quality is composed. This one, especially this fresco showing the Twin of Catania, that was identified first by Jean-Henri Mariette, so in the 18th century. The twins Amphinomius and Appius sailing their parents from the burning city of Catania. Here, the fire of Catania following the eruption of the Etna. Some other authors who preceded Pierre-Jean Mariette believed to see the burning of Troy with Aeneas carrying his father Anchises. And Henri Zerner also claimed that Rosso would have deliberately provoked this ambiguity between the burning of Troy and that of Catania, but the theme of filial piety is beyond doubt. The stucco figures are particularly sculptural, these two, one showing on the left a Gallic, a bearded old man dressed in a Gallic breeches, and on the right a young man in a Roman armor, showing the opposition young and old that would join the theme of filial piety of the fresco. And this theme of the filial piety is also in the fresco showing Cléobis and Biton, that these two, who were the two sons of the priestess of Juno, Sidipe, recounted by Herodotus' histories. The fresco, the two stucco low reliefs on the right is the one on the right is showing sea deep amidst men and animals struck by a plague pandemic. All the oxen having been decimated, the priestess chariot could not take her to the temple where she was to officiate. Her two sons, therefore, harnessed themselves to the chariot instead of the oxen. This is what we see on the fresco. The relief on the left is sculpted with the body of the two brothers plunged into eternal sleep by Juno, who had asked Oedip what she wanted for them, and had thus interpreted the response of a mother asking what is the best for my sons, and for their son the best was eternal sleep. You see the two bodies here asleep. This episode undoubtedly evoked the memory of the king's mother, filial piety, and the sovereign's gratitude for Louise of Savoy. The episode depicted in stucco in the lower part of the wall is showing Pyrrha feeding with her milk her old father Simon, imprisoned and condemned to die of hunger. This is an emblem of charity and also of filial piety. So most of authors have seen in it an allusion of the great affection of Francis I and his sister Margaret of Navarra for their mother, Louise of Savoy. The subject is further accentuated by the presence of two lying dogs, here and here, also symbol of fidelity. Time is fleeting. So continuing toward the end, we encounter subjects where Francis I appears in person or in emblematic forms. So here, the symbol of unity of state, with in the middle of a crowd representing different character of the people, soldiers, clergymen, lawyers, and the king dressed as the Roman emperor has a granada in his hand, and as you know, the pomegranate is symbolizing the unity of church in certain painting, but here the unity of state, and Francis I able to unify his people. Here the elephant is symbolizing the king as a very wise and stable king, with symbols and emblems. With his symbols and emblems, the elephant has the salamander on his forehead, and you can see the F of Francis I on his this part of the body, and is in the middle of the different gods, symbolizing the four elements, like Pluto, Neptune, and Zeus. Okay. And so here, the sacrifice officiated by Elisha against Ashab. This fresco depicts this sacrifice and the false prophets. It's a sacrifice officiated by Elisha against Ashab and against the false prophets of Baal, according to the words of the first book of Kings in the Old Testament. So the audience is composed of many vessels bearers, and on the altar is engraved the initial of Francis I here, the F. So this is to be understood as proof of the religiosity of Francis I and the support that the King of France gave to a true faith. And then this is the last fresco of the gallery, showing Francis I entering the temple of Jupiter and turning his back on ignorance and vices. So Francis I is the very small character here in the background, so entering this door with through which lots of light is coming through. He is carrying a sword in his right hand and a book under his left arm. So you also have the military power and the power of the leisure and and the knowledge. We know from an engraving that the pediment of the door bore the inscription Ostium Jovis, so door of Jupiter, and between the columns 2 large U words on which there finds the words Mali and Boni. Thus, the sovereign finds the path between good and evil and reaches the elevation of earthly desire through the love of letters in the illumination, thanks to which he repudiates vices and enters the temple of wisdom. He leaves behind him the vices born of ignorance, personified by the blind, the blindfolded men and women located on clouds. On either side, you can see 2 high sculptures in stucco, a satyr and a satyress, stand out as emblems of carnal desires and echoing the large anthropomorphic stuccos position on either side of the bath of Pallas. And you you can remember that at this point of the gallery, we are at the western end of the gallery, and we are reaching the Trinity Chapel. So this is the connection with the elevation of the throne. So quickly, some words on the conservation and contemporary challenge. How do we deal today with such a heritage? Explaining this message to the public is a challenge, but preserve it for future generation is another big challenge too. Frescoes and stuccos of the 16th century were many times restored from the 17th century on. The climate in Ile-de-France which is very humid, is not particularly adapted to the technique of fresco, and damages appeared very early in time. The more heavy conservation work occurred in the 19th century, especially during the reign of Louis-Philippe in the Gallery Francis I and in the Golden Gate by François-Édouard Picot, but also during the Second Empire in the Gallery again and in the Ballroom by Jean Allot. And then in 1964, the French Young Ministry of Culture gave funds to restore museum castles. André Malraux, the first Minister of Culture in France, had the initiative of this project. It was the time for de-restoration and of the idea to search for the pure Renaissance, to find the authentic frescoes under the restoration of the 19th century. These restorations were undertaken under the supervision of Oreste Binnenbaum, and they were the occasion to study the frescoes with a team of renewed specialists like Sylvie Béguin, André Chastel, Henri Zerner, and so on. And they define in particular the number. They define in particular the number of giornati in each painting. So it was a moment to understand a little bit more the technique, the painting techniques of Rosso Fiorentino and his workshop. So here you can see a photograph taken in the 60s, before the conservation work. And I wanted to show you some pictures taken at the occasion of the conservation work on the Golden Gate. Here, this is an old photograph showing intervention by Binnenbaum. It was before the intervention of Binnenbaum, with the repaint by François-Édouard Picot. So he completely had repainted the faces, all the details, but you can see that in the 60s the frescoes were already damaged by this, with this kind of loss everywhere on the surface. Today we notice that this decoration age and deteriorate, and to do complete conservation costs a lot, so very often several millions of euros, and it's complicated to plan it in the contemporary economical situation. What we do first, as regularly as possible, is to undust and check the condition of the frescoes and the stuccos. Here you can see scaffolding in the Duchess of Étampes chamber. It was in 2020 during the pandemic. It has been possible to study closely this part of the Renaissance decoration and to do a major dusting job with conservators. Several preliminary studies for restoration exist for the ballroom, for the Diana Gallery, and we have planned one for the Francis I Gallery, hopefully next year. Between 2022 and 2024, we were fortunate to be able to implement the restoration of the Golden Gate thanks to substantial contribution in sponsorship. Indeed, the restoration of the 19th century and those of the 20th century had aged badly, and it had become difficult to read the scenes. You can see the vault of the vestibule of the Golden Gate before restoration. It was it was darkened, and it was very difficult to see the figures and to understand what was going on. So when you start such a project, you are not alone, hopefully. Of course, the scientific and technical control is ensured by the conservation of historical monuments that gives authorization for the conservation work. The project is managed half by the architectural for historical monument and half by the curatorial team of the castle. But for such a project, you need specialists to help you to take the right decision. Therefore, we had created a scientific committee with academics from university, curators from the Louvre in painting and drawings, curators and academics from Italy, but also conservators from the Opificio delle Pietre Dure, who were more used than we were to restore frescoes. So at each crucial step, the members of the committee were invited to discuss on the proposed solution. And after minute studies, it was decided to clean the frescoes from the dirt that blackened the scenes with the technology of laser. The team was managed by Émilie Checoun and Alice Desprats, who are conservators specialized in frescoes, and you can see here one of them using laser on these frescoes. And here you can see a scene on the left, the scene with Hera in the Kingdom of Hypnos, cleared from Orest Binnenbaum's repaint, but wax and brown layers are still visible. And on the right, the scene with Hercules landing on the island of Kos, on which we decided to maintain a part of the restoration by Picot, because this part had nothing from the 16th century behind it, so it was wiser to maintain it. Here you can see the scene of Hera in the Kingdom of Hypnos with blockages before retouching, so it's what is really left from the 16th century fresco. And here the conservator teams recovering all the gaps on the scaffolding. So as a curator and as a director of heritage and collections, working in such a meaningful heritage site for history and history of art is a daily challenge. It is necessary to do it with humility, but also to understand everything that has been done before to preserve or to transform this site. Unfortunately, our predecessors did not always left notes or reports on what they did, which forces us to guess what they decided to do. As a conclusion, I would say that this difficulty is necessary to keep in mind, and that it is our turn to note and to do report, because what we do today commits us to the future. Thank you for your attention.